Okay, so this is an art lesson for second grade students. It can be used as low as kindergarten and as old as third grade. I think really any of the lower grades would do well with this assignment. So it integrates science majorly and a little bit of ELA integration as far as vocabulary terms goes. So the teacher would need a stick of butter, a pitcher of water, and a bottle of oil. I would suggest vegetable oil just because it's cheap, but really any kind of oil can be used. And then the students would need a set of oil pastels for each student. They would need watercolor as well, cups and paintbrushes to use for their watercolor to wash out their paintbrushes, and their paintbrushes to paint. And then paper towels to kind of dry off their paintbrushes. Each student would also need a cotton ball. And that's about it. So to begin the lesson, I would ask for a student volunteer and have the volunteer put a slice of butter in his hand and rub it in like lotion, and then try to wash it off in the pitcher of water. Of course, this wouldn't work, so I would ask the student to go around and show the classmates all the droplets on his hands. And then I would let the student wash his hands, sit back down, and then I would pour the oil into the pitcher of water just to demonstrate that the two do not mix. And then I would play a video on the smartboard. So I would need a laptop and access to a smartboard / projector, clear touch as well. And the video would just be a short explanation. The link is in the lesson plan for why oil and water do not mix. Anyway, so moving on, I would begin the lesson by having students help me pass out the material for every student. Every student would also need a piece of paper. The decision really is up to the teacher as for the size. I'm using sketchbook paper here, so it's pretty thick, which is what you'll want so that your paper doesn't get too curly when you do put the water on it. And then I would go over these terms. So I would say that today we're going to be making a project involving pumpkins, and we are going to create them by using analogous colors. And so analogous colors are any colors that touch each other on the color wheel. Usually it's 3 colors. It really can be 2 to like 4, but normally most people will say it's 3 colors. That's a pretty universal description of that term. And so I would want the students to incorporate the 3 different types of colors. So I would want them to use a primary, secondary, and tertiary. And they would need prior knowledge of these, but in second grade they should already have that. So I would tell them that they can do an orange pumpkin if they'd like to. If they want to have a little bit of fun with it, they can do a blue pumpkin, and then they could utilize blue-green and blue-green. They could do a red pumpkin and have red, violet, and red, violet, so on and so forth. I would then show some Miro images on the smartboard or projector, just to give the students an idea that you can still make your art look awesome even if the colors aren't accurate. Picasso was a good example too, but I think that Miro's work would work a little bit better for this particular assignment. So with that being said, I would tell them to take their darkest color. For me, that would be red. I am going to be using red, orange, and red, orange. So I would tell them to take their darkest color to begin their first pumpkin. I am going to make 2 pumpkins, but it's their choice however many they'd like to make. But I would say before they get started that they need to make sure to leave enough room for the sky. I don't want the whole page to be filled with pumpkins, because then they won't get to really show how the water interacts with the oil pastel. So I would begin with red and instruct the students. I would say, okay, students, we're going to begin. Grab your darkest color. For me, it's red, and you are going to make a C. And then a backwards C. And I just have tape on my wall so I don't get any materials on my wall. And then I would tell them to go ahead and put a few more lines and kind of make that a little more defined there. And then to show the creases on the pumpkin with their darkest color, they're just going to do this throughout, and to show the depth of the pumpkin or the 3 dimensions of the pumpkin, they are going to want to flatten out these curves as they get to the middle. So they want to follow the curve until the curve can't be followed anymore, until it's more or less a straight line right in the middle. So I am going to skip a little bit of room and now really get another crease going. Same over here. Really want to define these ridges in the pumpkin. And from the top all the way to the bottom, just like that. So now we can see that these lines here are a lot straighter than these curved ones on the edges. I would then take another color, it doesn't really matter which one you choose next, and go ahead and just kind of do the same thing. So, curve, follow the curve. I kind of like to do one side and then the other, but it doesn't matter too much. And you really want to, I would really want to tell the students, emphasize to them that they need to bring the curve all the way to the bottom and start all the way at the top and bring it to the bottom. Because sometimes I make these curves and then it's like my top ends up being way down here, and that's not right. I really do need to make sure they come at the top. So just keep on filling in with your colors. And so I would also introduce the word porous to the students. And so porous is just a texture that has a lot of holes in it, and that is exactly what oil pastels is, and we are going to make use of that. So I do not want the students to focus too much on coloring it in and making it really dark. That is exactly what I do not want, because the watercolor is going to fill in all of those holes that the oil pastel creates. So with that being said, I do want them to try to fill in as much of the pumpkin as possible. They can leave little streaks between, but right now this is kind of too much. It would just look like a skeleton of a pumpkin. So I want them to keep going, but just when they make their lines, they don't have to press real hard. They don't need to press so hard that they break their oil pastels and get a really dark shade. Just kind of lightly do it with all 3 of your colors. And so once they've done that with all 3 of their colors, I would tell them, okay, I want you to go ahead and incorporate another color. So I want you to look at what your primary color is and what your secondary color is, and then you need to figure out what color was mixed with your primary color to make your secondary color. And so for me, that would be yellow. So now I'm going to extend my color wheel from red, red, orange, and orange to red, red, orange, orange, yellow, orange, and yellow. So I'm going to grab 2 more colors to help me fill in the rest of my pumpkin. I have those right here. So, and that is because these colors go great together, because we want the pumpkin to appear orange, or the student might want the pumpkin to appear green or violet. And so showing these and utilizing the 2 colors that make up that color will really drive in how that color is created. And so from afar, it just looks like orange. And that's really awesome. So they would just keep on doing this, filling in, and then to create the idea of depth, I would want them to make another pumpkin that the first pumpkin overlaps. So instead of making them right next to each other, I would tell them to get that dark color again that they initially started out with. And I made one pumpkin kind of fat and short, and I want my next one to be kind of tall and pointy and really rounded. So I would show them how this one is overlapping. So this one looks like it's in the background now. And then when you work on your other one, make sure to not color and overlap this way, because this one's going to be behind. So you just want to have this one in the background, so don't get the streaks over, just kind of follow the curve, follow the curve. You're going to do the same thing, you know, making your difference. So anyway, as far as that goes, so I would go ahead and instruct them how to do that, and once that's done, they would end up with something like this, or several different pumpkins, maybe not orange. Anyway, this is what they would look like. And then we're going to do another analogous color scheme on the grass. So I want my grass to be green. They do not have to choose green. If you want blue grass, that's awesome, but I want green grass. So I'm going to do green, yellow, and yellow-green initially. So I'm going to take my green. Again, I do not really want the grass to be over the pumpkin, because then we're going to get kind of a weird blend. I'm going to, oh, I thought that was on my wall for a second, kind of stop when I get to the pumpkin, and all the way out like this. The students can use their creativity. If they want to overlap the pumpkin, that's okay. But I have it kind of so the pumpkins are pressing down the grass, but if they want to have it so the pumpkins are behind the grass, that's up to them. It's their art project. So anyway, I kind of just fill this in. Then I'd use my other colors and fill that in. Just keep going. That's awesome. Okay, and if again they want to extend their color, they can. So I'm going to look at what makes green, yellow, and blue. So I'm going to throw in a little bit of blue on my grass. Just a little bit. Kind of fill in some of those spaces. Okay, so now that they have that, I want to show them how to make the stems. So in mine, I decided to make one skinny tall stem that's really leafy and tendrily. And then the other one I chose to make more of a trunk. So I'm going to show them both ways to do this, and I'm going to tell them they need to exhibit at least two of these. Both of these. They can have, if they have 4 pumpkins and they want to do 4 green stems, that's not okay. I want them at least to have 1, so they could do 3 and 1, that's okay. But anyway, at least showing both. So I want to make mine go all the way up. They can do theirs however, that's just how mine is. And I'm going to have a little branch off, and my leaf off of it kind of goes off of the page here. And then fill that in. Again, not filling it in too dark. And then just creating a little tendril like that. Do even one more curl. And then as for the other one, I'm going to get my dark brown and then make a circle so we get that 3 dimension again. And just kind of fill that in. Realistically, it would be a little lighter in the front right here, but they're in 2nd grade, they're not going to be too worried about it. But I do want them to have that circle at top lighter, and I'll kind of emphasize that it's circle up top, so just like that. And then they would be done with the drawing. So with that done, we would then bring in the watercolor. And again, I'm going to use black for my sky. That's not necessary, but I do want to personally use black. So I'm going to tell them to get their paintbrush very wet and then dip it in their black paint. And they're just going to streak it across their sky. And watercolor is really light, and so they're probably going to have to make several lines and several layers. And I do need to tell them that I want for their whole sky to be covered, but I do not want it all to be the same color. So I want to show them movement within a painting. And as far as movement within a painting goes, we want to show that it's kind of a windy and wispy Halloween type night. And so obviously you can't see wind, but when you draw, you can see whatever you want to see, or when you paint. And so I'm going to make my sky really streaky so that viewers can see that it's windy. So I would just keep on doing this and just going straight across the pumpkins and straight across the grass. Oh, you know what? I missed a step, my fault. Before having them paint, I would want them to see how oil pastel can be blended. And so I do want this project to be as porous as possible so that the watercolor will fill in those holes, but I also want the students to be able to get the opportunity to experiment with the malleability of oil pastel. So I would have them get their cotton balls. I'm going to use a tissue because coronavirus, that I couldn't find any cotton balls, but anyway, and then just do it on the grass, not on the pumpkin. I want the pumpkin to have these really cool streaks, but on the grass, just because there's just a little bit, I want them to play with blending. So just kind of blend it in, mush all those colors together, make it a lot less streaky than the pumpkins, and they should be seeing rub off like this, so it should be coming off onto their tissue there. Just making it streaky. There we go. I almost forgot that. That's an important part. I want the students to see all the different ways that oil pastels can be used. So anyway, back to the sky. When they get to the pumpkin, I do not want them to really try to blend in that the wateriness of the paint. So here you can see all these little water droplets. That's what we're going for. We want to show that the oil and water do not mix. So they could spend time going back and forth and trying to fill it in, but I don't want them to. That's a really cool look, and that's how we want it to be. So they would just need to keep going and going until they were satisfied with their sky. Again, showing the motion of the sky, the movement of the wind, going back and forth on their pumpkins, and just really getting a cool, unique picture. So for some accommodations, if I had a student with ADHD, I would probably have them assigned to work with a para, just so they kind of stay on task. And if I had a student with motor impairment or with vision impairment, I would have square or triangular oil pastels, so they, for one, for the blind student, they weren't rolling all over the place, and then secondly, for the motor impaired student, it would just be easier for them to hold it if they have issues with their hands. So they would just keep on filling in until they were satisfied. And of course you want to instruct the students very early on in the project to put their names on the back, and then because these projects are going to take a really long time to dry, once you put this much water on them, it's going to be more or less like cloth. So you won't want to have them flip it over. It just won't work. You won't want to have them flip it over to put their name on it later, just have them do it in the very beginning. So just back and forth, letting it be really porous and watery, getting all these really cool lines, kind of blending, just until they're satisfied. And so I think that all students should have the opportunity to be as unique and an individual in their art as possible, but I also think that they need to be shown appropriate and respectable craftsmanship. So I would want to go around and check on theirs before they turn them in, and maybe if their sky was really light or it really looked like it was only one color, I would tell them, go ahead and instruct them to kind of try to maybe get less paint and less water on your brush this time and make it really dark, or maybe this spot is super duper dark and this spot over here isn't, so get a little bit more water and kind of try to streak some of these things in. Anyway, so that's the project, and really it can be used with anything. I think pumpkins are fun because it's kind of a cool fall project. If you want to do, I don't know, snowmen, or you want to do a tree, or you want to do some bananas, whatever. It can be used a number of ways, but it's really individualized to the student. You just want to drive in the ideas of what an analogous color scheme is, primary, secondary, and tertiary. You want to drive in the idea of texture. You want to drive in the idea of using overlapping and darkening and lighting as in shading, to show depth, and just some things like this. And then blending. Again, you can use blending pencils, but this would kind of be something I would do with older students. Young students, it's a cool idea to just stick with cotton balls, because even when I myself do projects with oil pastel or charcoal, I honestly like to use Q-tips and cotton balls better than blending pencils a lot of the time. I don't know, it's just a personal preference. So anyway, that about wraps it up. So thank you for watching, and that was my second grade lesson on pumpkins.